Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Let's talk about every single book I read in July, and we're gonna do it a bit of Chaos Edition because I am not going to consult any of the reviews that I wrote about these books, and I'm not gonna consult the blurbs. This is purely going to be based off of what I remember. And I'm gonna caveat that with the fact that my memory isn't great at the best of times. So please tell me in the comments down below if any of the books blurbs that I'm giving are completely off base. This is going to be a bit of a fun game that we're playing together where I could be completely wrong about the books that I'm talking about and you guys are going to have to tell me. All I know about the books that I am about to tell you about is the number that they were, which is 17, and the rating that I gave them. I am actually going to consult the spreadsheet, but I'm not going to be looking at the blurbs and I'm not going to be looking at my reviews. So let's crack straight in with the first book that I attempted to read in July, which was Rhapsodic by Thalassa. This is the first book in the Bargainer series by this author, and it is a book that I have read before, but it is also a book that I DNF'd. This book follows a woman whose name I don't remember, who basically lives in a world where people make deals with this being called the Bargainer. I'm pretty sure his name is something that I thought was really funny, like Desmond or something, but the deals with the Bargainer basically work like this. You make a deal for something you really want, and he collects in a way that you never expected. Except the one caveat, the one exclusion to all of this, the one exception is the right word, not exclusion, is the fact that our main character, whose name I can't remember, has this string of beads going all the way up her arm for the many, I think couple hundred deals that she's made with the Bargainer. That is very much against his rules because you make one deal, you collect immediately. He does not hold many IOUs with people. These two people have a long and tumultuous history with each other, which ended 7 years prior to the beginning of this book when all of a sudden the Bargainer disappeared out of this girl's life. He has returned though, and he has come to collect on the deals that they have made. What I do remember about this story is that I loved it the first time that I picked it up, and I really didn't the second time because I think it started to really lag, it started to get really boring, and the plot just kind of appeared in the last 50 pages of the story. And prior to that, it was this back and forth timeline of the present timeline and him collecting on the deals and making her kind of agree to things that, you know, consent was a question mark a bit around this book. And then the past timeline where she is literally a child talking to this being and he is kind of falling in love with her when she's like a child. There was a lot about this book that I thought was really weird. I DNF'd this book and I am not going to be continuing with this series. Next up, after the slump, I guess, that Rhapsodic was almost putting me into, I went into a little bit of a spiral of smutty blue alien romances, and this is when I started to pick up the Ice Planet Barbarian series. So the first book that I picked up was the first book, and that's Ice Planet Barbarian. This follows Vektal and Georgie. Don't ask me why I remember that, but not the characters in Rhapsodics. This whole series is by Dixon, and it basically follows a group of women who were kidnapped from Earth by these weird, I think, orange basketball head aliens, like the typical, what you would imagine when you think alien, big head, tiny body, creepy, gross, basketball head. Aliens that are orange, and they were kidnapped by these aliens and brought up into this spaceship thing in the sky, treated horrifically by these aliens. Massive trigger warnings before you pick up this series because it jumps right into exactly what was going on with these women and it does not hold back. Then all of a sudden the women come together, form a bit of a rebellion and make the spacecraft crash onto an ice planet. They escape their captors only to be found by a bunch of really big blue aliens. They have tails, they're like 7 feet tall, they're blue, and they live in this kind of archaic, like Stone Age sort of society, hunter-forager, those sorts of things. And they also have these things called mates, or like kui, which is like in their body, and it vibrates basically whenever they find their soulmate, their mate. So the first book follows Vektal and Georgie. Vektal is like the chief of the clan, and Georgie is kind of like the leader of the women, the unofficial leader of the women. They fall in love and I guess deal with the arrival of these women and bringing them back into safety at the blue ice planet Barbarians cave system thing. And I just realized that I spent this entire time describing to you the first book, but I actually read that book in June. So the first book of this series that I read in July was Barbarian Lover, which I think is the third book in the full series. I gave this book 4 stars. It follows Aehako and Kira, and this is kind of like a friends to lovers romance. Neither of them have mated despite Kira being on this planet for a really long time, and so they end up kind of venturing off somewhere to discover, I think, a crash site, I can't remember, and end up falling in love. It's a friends to lovers romance. I gave that book 4 stars, and then I went back to read the extended epilogues, I guess, for the previous 2 books in the series. So we have Ice Planet Honeymoon for Vektal and Georgia, and this book is all about what happens in their life after the events of the first book. I also gave this book 4 stars, absolutely loved it. Then we have Ice Planet Honeymoon for Raahosh and Liz. Raahosh is like a hunter, kind of isolated in this world. He likes to keep to himself, and Liz is like a spunky woman who really wants to fight and hunt rather than be like a kept woman like some of the other women that arrived on the planet. So this follows their honeymoon, and I gave this book 4 stars as well. And then I read Ice Planet Honeymoon for Aehako and Kira, so that follows their honeymoon period, obviously. And I think for them it was kind of coming to terms with the fact that they have kids that are kind of taking over their lives, I think, but that could be completely wrong. No, I think Aehako gets really overprotective of Kira, and she's just trying to make him back off, and I really enjoyed that, so I gave that 4 stars as well. Then I read Barbarian Mine by Ruby Dixon. This is another sort of more fuller length novel in this series, and by full length I mean they're like up to 300 pages, they're not very long. And this one follows 2 characters, I can't remember their names, but one of them is secluded. He kind of lives in a cave, and I think he kidnaps one of the women from the crash site, and he has an incredibly rudimental knowledge of even his own language, let alone English. So there is a massive language barrier between the 2 main characters in this story, and that's basically because as a young boy he was taken away from the community, from the tribe, by his father, and they lived in isolation, and he was kind of brainwashed to believe that the tribe were like the bad ones. And so he continues to live this life. He kidnaps one of the women because he recognizes her as his mate, and they live together, they fall in love, until one day they realize that I think she's getting really sick and they need help from the tribe, so they have to be brought back into it. I gave this book 4 stars. I had a really fun time with it. And right after reading that book, I read their Ice Planet Honeymoon. So this was Rukh and Harlow, I remember that now. And I read their Ice Planet Honeymoon, and that's all about them becoming a part of the tribe again. I think she's going through pregnancy, and yeah, it's just their honeymoon period. Very short little book. Had a lovely time. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Ice Planet Holiday, which is, I think, a novella in this series, which is all about these women. It's kind of like them getting used to being in this world and trying to introduce some of their sort of human traditions to the Ice Planet barbarian men. So in this particular situation, all the women are kind of like, well, let's celebrate Christmas. We don't have Christmas. But then also you've got a new couple that's introduced. I can't remember their names, but basically when the spaceship crash landed, one of the couples was created not because they were mates, but because they both just kind of wanted to be together. The woman was looking for security, the guy just wanted someone to be with. So they came together and unfortunately created this really unhealthy kind of abusive relationship. And then the woman finds her actual mate in this sort of Ice Planet Holiday novella. And so it's all about them trying to like navigate that situation, get her out of this abusive relationship, and build this romance and this trust when right now she doesn't exactly trust a lot of the aliens in this world. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was so wholesome and amazing. Then I read Barbarian's Prize, and this is basically about one woman who is yet to find her mate, but she is one of the last human women standing, and she is considered to be the most beautiful. So there are a bunch of men like vying for her hand basically, and she's getting really sick and tired of it, and she has a lot of distrust of men in general, so she's just really hesitant to get involved with any of these aliens. So her friends decide to set up a kind of competition where they all have to compete in various tasks to gain her hand. But right as this competition starts, she finds a guy that she actually really wants to be with, and so he enters the competition alongside all these other men, and they're building this relationship in the process, and she's realizing that she wants to be with him, but she has to be a part of this competition now because she's agreed to it, and it's kind of like a a romance between them while also trying to deal with external barriers that are keeping them apart. Again, really sweet and swoon-worthy. I gave that one 4 stars. And then lastly, I think the last full-length novel that I read in this series was Barbarian Mate, which is an enemies to lovers or a hate to love romance between 2 characters who they didn't ever like resonate or like mate with each other, but they've known each other since the beginning. And basically the woman thinks that this is because she's got an IUD, birth control, and apparently it's a rule in this world that you only mate with someone when the woman is ready to have a child. So basically one day her IUD falls out and she is ready to have babies, and she finds out that she is mated to the one guy in this entire tribe that she hates with every fiber of her being. These two argue constantly, but then they're forced into a situation where they have to leave the cave and they fall in love in the process, and it's actually a really sweet romance. I gave that book 3 stars. I can't remember specifically why it was rated lower than the others. I think potentially because it was more of a slow burn and I wasn't in the mood for that at that point in time. But then I read a couple more novellas, and the first one was Having the Barbarian's Baby. I don't remember which couple this follows. I'm guessing it's all about a woman going through the whole giving birth process. I'm pretty sure she's just about to give birth when her mate has to go off and hunt, and it's all about her freaking out because her mate isn't there for her or there with her when she's going through labor. It's a short little novella and it's an incredibly quick read. It follows a couple that we haven't spent much time with, and I gave it 4 stars because the tension was so high in that one. And then the last book in this world that I read was Ice Ice Baby. This follows a couple who has twins, and their lives are being completely overtaken by these twins, and so they're struggling to just find time together to be with each other. And so it's all about them trying to come back to each other and enjoy each other's company and hand their twins off to other people so that they can actually just be a couple and do couple things again. They're both incredibly deprived of sexy time, and so they're just trying to create opportunities for themselves and rework their relationship so that they're prioritizing themselves as well. I gave this book 3 stars because I wasn't super invested in the storyline, but I still thought it was interesting, and this is where I ended my Ice Planet Barbarians journey, at least for the time being, because this is the point where they've covered all the women that were originally crash landing on this planet, but now they've found a bunch of new ones, so I guess the series takes a new turn from here. Next up, I was still remaining in my kind of smutty mood, and so I picked up A Kingdom of Stars and Shadows by Holly Renee. Despite the fact that I gave this book 4 stars, right now I literally can't remember a single thing about it. So that, I guess, says a lot about the length of my own memory, but also the staying power of this book. So maybe I need to rethink my rating. I remember it being a smutty romance, but I think that's all I remember of it. So I guess let me know in the comments down below if you know what this is about and what you liked about it if you've read it. I'm overheated, so sorry if my position's changed. But next up is a book that I do remember by Holly Renee, and that was The Veiled Kingdom. I gave this book 3 stars, but given the fact that the lasting power of the previous one has been absolutely zilch, and I do remember a lot about this one, maybe I should be reversing my ratings and giving this one 4 stars and the other one 3 stars? I don't know. Let me know what you think. But basically, this book is about a woman who runs away from her kingdom. She is a princess because she doesn't like the way it's run. Her father is a shit king. And she runs away on the night of this massive riot, only to then be found by the rebels that are running this riot. And she decides that the only way that she's going to survive in this rebel camp is to hide her own identity. They don't know who she is, and she is not about to tell them. She is then taken in by these rebels, trained, taught to fight, everything like that. And she is also noticed, I guess, by the son of the leader of the rebellion named Dacre. Dacre takes her in, protects her from his father a little bit, teaches her to fight, and a lovely kind of hate to love romance blooms between the two of them. I loved a lot about this book. I loved the relationship. I loved the kind of plot twist at the end, which was pretty predictable given the setup of this book, but I still, you know, it still had an impact on me reading it. I think the only thing that I didn't like about this book was potentially the pacing of it, but I still gave it 3 stars and I really enjoyed it. We're almost at the end. Next up, I read Rootbound by Tarah DeWitt. This story is about a woman whose entire life has kind of fallen apart after her recent divorce, and she's rebuilt her life as a photographer, and things finally seem to be going well for her until her boss comes up to her one day and sends her on assignment to this ranch kind of in the middle of nowhere, because this ranch has become really, really popular because of a TV show that's filmed on it. The only problem is that the ranch is owned by her estranged family. She really does not want to go, but she ends up going to do some photography on the ranch and falls in love with one of the ranch hands. It's a bit of a rocky start because the ranch hand, Henry, knows who she is and knows that she is estranged from the family, and he feels a lot of loyalty to them. So he's not her biggest fan, but slowly they work together to build up their relationship with each other, rebuild the relationship with her family after the years and 20 years, I think, of estrangement, and take some really, really beautiful pictures along the way. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it because of the way it meshed, you know, really growing and keeping my interest in both the family dynamics and building that relationship, and also the relationship, the romantic relationship between our two main characters. I thought it was emotional in the best way. It did have me tearing up at times, but then it also had me laughing and smiling and everything along the way. It was such a roller coaster of a read in terms of emotions and depth of emotions that I felt while I was reading this book. I 100% recommend it. It was a massive surprise to me because I tried Savor It by Tarah DeWitt and did not like it. I DNF'd that book, but this one, it hit the spot. It was incredible. Lastly, I picked up Pucking Wild by Emily Rath. This is the second book in the Jacksonville Rays series by this author. The first book is a Why Choose romance. This book is about the best friend of the main character in the first book and another one of the hockey players on the team. It is an age gap romance. This is an ice hockey sports romance as well, and it is actually way more emotional than I expected it to be. The first book was just incredibly smut heavy, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed every minute of that. But this book was more about building a relationship between two people who are really struggling to trust in each other. So our main character, her life is kind of falling apart because of an abusive relationship that she's in, and she's trying to get a divorce, but the guy just is not letting her go. So she kind of escapes to her best friend's house in Jacksonville and then moves into one of her best friend's husband's old apartment, only to find out that there's already someone else living there because of a massive injury. He had to move into an apartment that was a little bit more accessible. So it's very much forced proximity because they're forced to live together. This, like I said, was way more of an emotional romance than I expected, considering the first book was incredibly, incredibly smutty, but I would still recommend it if you are one who likes an emotional romance or someone who likes a kind of smutty romance, because it kind of ticks both of those boxes. I gave it 4 stars because it was emotional. It took me on an absolute emotional ride, but then it also just had me really vibing with the sexy time between the two characters as well. The way that it teased the third book in the series as well was absolutely perfect. I think it's an accidental pregnancy and I could not be more excited for it. So gonna be reading that one hopefully really soon, but that is the last book that I read in July. Sorry if this video was a little bit chaotic because I was just trying to see what I could remember of all the books that I'd read and see if they really made an impact on me. Clearly we've got some that did and some that really didn't. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that if I wasn't able to accurately describe some of these books, you have a bit of fun in the comment section letting me know where I was wrong, and frankly just telling me what Kingdom of Stars and Shadows was about, because I do not remember, and I really am worried about why I gave that 4 stars if I don't remember a single thing about it. Like, the lasting power clearly is not very long on that one, but I do remember enjoying it. As always, please do let me know if you like this video by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I release new videos. My camera is massively overheating. I've tried to film this clip so many times, so I am going to go before my camera shorts out again. I cannot wait to see you guys in the next video. I hope you have a lovely day on purpose, and I will see you soon. Bye!